So our panel of judges today includes Frank Miele, who's the president of Pegasus Lectures Incorporated, Howard Levin, who's a co-founder of Coridea Inc., sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and Cameron Pitt, who is also from Versant Ventures. So thank you guys for attending, and we hope that you enjoy these presentations. So to start is Benji Strauss, who's going to present on Cardimetrics.
Good afternoon. Thanks, guys, for being here. I am Benji Strauss. I'm the CEO of Cardimetrics, and what my team has been developing is a system to reduce the burden of heart failure and readmissions. So let's get right into it. What is the problem that the heart failure world is facing right now? And one of the main ones is that home monitoring for heart failure patients to determine how healthy or not healthy they are and how effective or ineffective their medication regimens are is really one of two things. It's either extremely basic, sacrificing advanced metrics in favor of ease of use and patient compliance, or it can be a little bit more advanced, get slightly better metrics, but is so hard to use that either we need to have an expensive home care nurse come 3 times a week to the patient's home to help them use it, or they just don't use it. And what that results in is that of the 2 million heart failure patients who are admitted to the hospital every year, within just a few months, half of them end up back in the hospital for emergency treatment, such as diuresis. And the majority of these are about 85% are ultimately preventable if we had a better system. And this rate of readmission has a profound burden in a number of ways. One is on both the hospitals and payers. Of the million readmissions, each one costs an average of anywhere between $15,000 and $25,000, creating a $17.5 billion burden just from the readmissions. And that manifests as unpaid visits that hospitals have to pick up, or penalties from payers, or payers taking on a huge burden. And on the other side, which is fairly self-evident, there's a massive reduction in quality of life for patients. And we also know that as patients get older, the more times they go into the hospital, the less likely it is that they'll walk out. And so I'd like to present to you our approach to solving the problem with a little YouTube video of our prototype.
Please put on your clip and hold the handles.
Our system instructs the patient on exactly what to do. We have exactly one moving part.
Relax and breathe normally.
And over the next 15 seconds,
your biometrics.
we acquire 9
Please
biometrics
stay on the scale.
by just having the patient stand on the scale.
Any of these symptoms recently?
We then ask the patient about any symptoms they've had,
Complete. How?
and all of that is transmitted to a cloud accessible by the patient's care doctor with both 4G and Wi-Fi modems. So the patient's care provider can log in. He or she can see the patient's daily metrics, not just weight, but also 6 leads of EKG, heart rate, respiratory rate, level of pulmonary congestion and pulmonary edema, level of peripheral edema, pulse oximetry, how well the patient balances, and a cuffless surrogate of systolic blood pressure. And again, you can take a look at all of these. And not only do we get daily metrics, but the idea is that we can trend each of these metrics against the patient's baseline to see what the deviations are from normal. And the idea is that we can detect these changes at a much earlier stage than, say, just a bathroom scale. And if we can do that, what we're able to do is remotely, the patient's care provider can titrate their medication regimen, can titrate a dose of Lasix. So if we see an increase in both weight and fluid retention, we can say maybe you should take 40 milligrams of Lasix today instead of 20. We can do that for a number of medications as well as lifestyle, diet, etc. So there are 6 million heart failure patients in the US, and the number is going to increase as lifespans continue to become longer. And 3/4 of those patients, or 4.5 million, are covered by Medicare. But if you notice, only about 500,000 are on current telemonitoring systems, which is a nice market, but there's an enormous amount of room for growth. And the reason that is because, as I mentioned, the telehealth systems that exist right now are extremely expensive. The reason that is because the approach that a lot of these companies like Honeywell, Philips, what they take is they'll take a tablet and they'll buy off-the-shelf components to measure individual metrics. So they'll take a tablet and integrate a Bluetooth pulse ox and a Bluetooth bathroom scale, maybe a Bluetooth blood pressure cuff. And number one, by buying these components off the shelf, the entire system costs about $2,000 or $3,000, which creates a burden for hospitals to buy. And again, it's because they're individual components, the more metrics you measure, the more complicated it gets. And for complicated systems, patients need a home care provider to come 2 or 3 times a week to help them use it, which is extremely expensive. And so what we're going to be targeting are those 4.5 million patients to try to prevent those readmissions and increase the size of the market. Our strategy for launching is to approach integrated delivery networks. So as opposed to just standalone hospitals, look for systems that have comprehensive patient care under one roof. So hospitals that also have PT clinics or home care providers such as Mount Sinai, North Shore LIJ, Kaiser, etc. And the idea is that if we can go to their home care providing service and provide them with these scales, say lease them for $30 a month instead of an upfront fee for $3,000 a month, we reduce that burden. And if we can enable them to reduce their readmissions, that will save them enormous costs and create a cascade of more integrated delivery networks using our system and our service. I'd like to show you our argument for why we can get into these systems, and that's because I've talked a little bit about what the main competitors, Honeywell and HomeEd, have done, and they really, again, they take a kind of basic metrics and package them with a tablet, whereas we can get beyond just pulse ox and weight. We can look at heart rate, 6 leads of EKG, and these other metrics. I should also mention that the scale has been designed in full compliance with the FDA's guidances for industry, as well as all of HIPAA's requirements. Since being founded in early 2014, we developed an initial prototype, went out and raised $500,000 of angel funding, submitted 3 patent applications, 1 of which has been issued, 2 of which are still pending, all 3 of which have international components to them. We've also been awarded as one of the American Heart Association's 3 most innovative cardiovascular startups of 2014. We now have clinical quality prototypes that are ready to go in our clinical studies. We validated the system per FDA standards, and we've gotten commitments from the best heart failure doctors in the world to test our system. And just a couple of weeks ago, on October 15th, we submitted a fast-track application to the NIH to get $1.5 million to fund some of these trials. The opinion leaders that are going to be testing our system are Dr. Wellen at Jefferson in Philadelphia, who is of Partners HF fame, as well as Dr. Abraham at Ohio State, who's of CardioMEMS fame. And then we have our very own opinion leaders here at Sinai, Dr. Pinney, Dr. Lala, and Dr. Kukin. This is us, and our next steps are to raise up to $4 million to fund these trials, which will ultimately, hopefully show our reduction in readmissions and improvement in quality of life for patients. And we're also looking for a commercialization partner to get there. Thanks for listening.
And now we'll just have the judges ask questions. If we have time at the end, we'll also open up to the audience as well.
Hello.
Hi.
My first question is, what's the estimated cost for creating this product in terms of the individual cost?
In large quantities?
Yes.
$300.
$300 per?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And your estimation is that it's $30 per month, and the other companies are selling at $3K up front?
That's right.
What's the current reimbursement for in outpatient measurement?
For these measurements, it really varies by state. It's a fairly new reimbursement code for Medicare, but it averages out to about $150 a month. And ultimately, we'd like to get there and beyond, right? Ultimately, we'd like to demonstrate that our system works better than all the other ones, which would entitle us or make a really good argument for us to get reimbursed at a higher rate, above 150. But at the very beginning, when we don't have a reimbursement code, we'd like to remove the barriers for hospitals to use this. And so our cost for transmitting an analysis is pretty low. And so we can, if we can cover the cost of goods in the first year with a $30 lease payment, and we can charge, say, $45 a month, $45 a month for the transmission, hosting, and analysis service, we can make a pretty nice margin.
So you're amortizing the cost of your $300, so you can take 3 years to get your device paid back.
It would take 1 year. 12 months, $30 a month. We're expecting
$30 a month, sorry. And then, so the other question is, for that 100, if you want to get more reimbursement, you're going to have to show you did something different. So the question is, do you have any idea of, for example, the number you would need to treat in order to reduce one admission?
Yeah, so we've taken a look at some studies as far as how we need to power the trial. We looked at a live course study just to kind of get an idea of what they did, and also took a look at Partners HF to see how we would similarly power the study. And so right now, we've designed our study to have two phases. Phase one would just be validation of the system from an engineering perspective to show that we acquire the metrics that we say we do and in a quality fashion. And then the phase two study really has two components, one of which is providing the device for patients and seeing if we can take all that data after 30 or 60 days and seeing if we can create a single composite score for heart failure readmissions. And that's kind of analogous to what Partners HF did. And then the other half of the study would be providing the scale for patients and giving access to the clinicians to all of the data, all 9 metrics, and seeing if they can use that in real time to titrate medications and ultimately reduce readmissions.
But in order to make money, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, if you're charging people 30 times 12 per year, so 360 a year, right, for the thing. And, if you have to treat 10 people to cut down one admission, where do you have an idea of how, what you think your benefit's going to be in terms of the, do you have any projections of what it's going to be? I know you don't know what it's going to be, but
Off
any projections?
off the top of my head, I can't give you a solid answer, but what I can tell you is that at $75 over a year, which would be, let's say, under $1,000 a year, if we can give this to 10 patients, if we can give this to 15 patients and it prevents one readmission, it's paid for itself.
Right, but what I'm encouraging you to do is when you look at your clinical trial and you look at the design of your clinical trial, try and look at the other, there's a number of different modalities that are more expensive on the market right now. And so the question is, if you look at their trial and how they justified the price that they were able to get and the number of patients it took to get there and how they justified the reimbursement, you might be able to have a better idea how much it's going to cost you or how much you're going to need to raise in order to do the trial.
So understood.
Well, yeah, because I'm looking at the numbers and thinking that basically it takes 8 years for you to get to the value of their 3K that they're asking for up front. So I'm wondering how you arrived at the $30 per month.
The 3K well...
If your competitors are selling for 3K up front, right, and you're charging $30 a month, right, so 300, so 8 years is basically 3K, right? So how did you come up with your pricing of $30 a month?
Well, so I would start off by saying that 3K is probably a bad number to use as a reference point because more often than not, hospitals aren't buying the systems at that price.
Okay, that was going to be my follow-up, is how big are those markets right now for your competitors? And then the second question, unrelated, is what are they giving? You're talking about creating an algorithm that then weights your metrics that you get and spit out a number.
Right, like red, yellow, or green.
What are they spitting out right now? What are they giving? And
they're spitting out the raw data, and then sending it to. More often than not, it's not the patient's care provider. More often than not, it's actually the care coordinator from the home nursing group that takes a look at the data and analyzes it. It's probably too much to give that much raw data to clinicians.
So I know you haven't done the clinical trials, but have you done any algorithmic work to see if you can actually collapse it down to a metric?
No, we haven't. We haven't. That's why we need to do the study. Right? There hasn't been a study that
I understand
takes
that, but you haven't taken some and tried it on 50 healthy people or whatever. Take 50.
Well, it wouldn't really give us much for healthy people, right? The idea is that we're looking to predict readmission risk.
So let's say you go into Dr. Kukin's clinic. You just roll into clinic, take your device, and you make your measurements like you said. So I turn to my Versant partner here since he's going to be funding you. And
sounds good.
So the venture capitalist is going to ask questions like, so why do you believe that the measurements you chose have any relevance to anything? All of these measurements have been used before.
Right.
And,
Some have.
everybody's got, their weight measure or this measure or that measure or whatever. So clinically, these measurements have been done. What your venture capital friend is going to ask you is, what makes you think that we should give you X million dollars to do this clinical trial? Why are you theoretically, I know you don't have the data, but why theoretically should combining your set of data points give you a better outcome than what's done now?
I would answer that with really two separate answers. One is our data gives a comprehensive view into the cardiac health of the patient, as opposed to, say, a metric like weight alone, which is fairly removed from how well the heart is functioning. The second thing I would say is the particular metrics that we get can create either novel or more detailed metrics. For example, right now the standard for monitoring patients is just weight, and we know that does not do a very good job of determining level of congestion. But we can measure level of impedance, which is a correlate of how full the lungs are with fluid or how full the feet are with fluid, right? So for instance, we know that water weighs exactly 2.2 pounds per liter, right? So if our patient is at home and they've gained a kilogram or 2.2 pounds overnight, and we see that they've also gained a liter of fluid in their lungs or fluid in their legs, we can determine precisely why they're gaining weight. So if they gained no fluid in their lungs, but they did gain the weight, we would say, okay, you don't need to be readmitted. We don't need to titrate your dose of Lasix. Maybe you should eat a little bit healthier. Maybe you should try to exercise for 30 minutes a day, but we don't need to change anything. If we see that they've gained weight and a corresponding amount of fluid is gained, then we can say with much better certainty, okay, this patient needs 40 or 60 milligrams of Lasix today instead of 20, or they need to reduce their salt intake. So I can't say, none of us can say with certainty.
Right.
Right.
That's the difference between a business and a science project.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to get across, is that when you're trying to develop an algorithm, you're doing science. When you have an algorithm, you're trying to implement it in a cost-effective, user-friendly way that allows you to reduce cost of the healthcare system. That's business. Right. So, I would encourage you, first of all, don't misunderstand me. I think it's a great project, and I think it's answering a big problem. Yeah. It's just, if you're going to go to venture capitalists, they're not going to pay you for science. Right. They're going to pay you to answer a business question or develop a device. Sure. So if there's a way to take advantage of what was suggested, potentially, roll into clinic, even using off-the-shelf clinically available thing, make 7 different devices to make all your measurements. If you then can come up with an algorithm of some sort, or at least try and figure some way to put a little meat behind what you're saying, these are the measurements, and venture capitalists may come up and say, oh, well, this is a better measurement, and how are you going to refute that?
Thanks for that leading to my question. So I guess my major question is, how do you know which of the 9 metrics are essential for the key indications that you're looking at, and how are those chosen?
We don't. Yeah. We don't. That's why we have to do the study. And that's what would come out of the study on creating a composite algorithm, right? If we see that the weight that is accorded to one of the 9 metrics is 0, then we know that doesn't really predict or contribute to the prediction of rehospitalization.
Right, but then you've put, hardware, money, software validation, etc., into, tooling into your device without knowing if that metric is needed.
Right.
Right. Right, which is why I asked the original question of, if I understand, first of all, I have a degree in math, so I get statistics and I get statistically valid sample space. But I get that you won't have the numbers, but it seems that proof of concept would be really valuable to take some n, a small n, I know it's not statistically significant sample, and then see which parameters seem to indicate that they're important,
Yeah.
right? Which aren't, so you're not spending a bunch of money on something that doesn't need to be there. And I do think it's important that you test the normals because you don't want to end up with false positives, right? So as someone, if you came to me, I'd want to look at the data, I'd say, okay, you can't just prove to me that you predicted, how many times you predicted right, but I want to know also if you ever predicted wrong and what the outcomes of that is.
Yeah.
So I do think it's valuable to have some normals in there as well.
Okay. I think having normals in there makes sense. What I would go back and say though is that if you want to test 9 metrics in patients to see if it reduces 30-day readmissions, if you want to do it in the home, which is the only way to really do it 30 days straight, you can't give them a 12-lead EKG machine, right, and 8 other metrics and say, I'm going to have you abrade your skin each day, put electrolyte gel on, put the electrode on, get it in the exact 10 anatomically perfect locations, and then rinse and repeat for 9 other metrics.
Do you have a prototype now?
Yes.
And do you have more than one prototype, or?
We have a second prototype as well. Yeah.
But again, I guess the basic question is, to your question, what makes you believe that 6 leads of EKG give you any more information than 1 lead of EKG? Other than with rhythm, you can get 1 lead, you've got all the rhythm you want, right? So you're
you can't
saying
get reimbursed for one lead. You need at least 2 leads to get reimbursed for.
Okay, but that doesn't mean it's useful, right?
True.
So my question is, the only thing you can get above 1 lead are, axis changes or ST changes or something like that, which you don't necessarily, unless you have some reason, believe that you're going to see in these people. So if you're saying that I'm getting 6, if the answer to I'm getting 6 leads because I can only charge for 2 or more, that may not be the best thing putting into your algorithm. But,
sure.
But I understand. Again, don't take our responses as beating you up, which we're enjoying immensely. But
He might be.
yeah.
Well, my first answer would be, as far as the critique of having 6 leads, is that you can look at different ST segments, and you can look at rhythm, which you can do in 1, but it's not entirely correct to say that you can't get anything more, right? So one of the big problems with heart failure is arrhythmias, and one of the best predictors for developing arrhythmias is QT interval delta.
Which you can get on 1 lead.
No.
Yes.
It varies based on the different vectors you take. Depending on where you're getting hypertrophy or where you're getting remodeling, you'll actually see a difference in QT interval.
And, okay, let's assume that that's correct.
Okay.
Let's go on to another one. You're using pulse wave velocity as a index
That's right.
of blood pressure.
Correct.
Why? Why not just take blood pressure?
Because that would violate the thesis of the entire project, which is 1 moving part for all the metrics. And we wouldn't want to double the number of moving parts to add a single additional metric.
Unless it's actually better.
Unless it's actually better.
So it gets back to the question again of why pulse wave velocity. I can understand if blood pressure in and of itself, there's no reason to believe that any of these, per se, have any different relevance put on your machine than they do in general clinical practice.
Sure.
Right? So there's got to be at least some data in the literature that you can use to back up your belief that these X metrics are the reasons why, here are the reasons why we chose these. We know that, somebody's shortness of breath, like for example, why do you have pulse ox?
Well, as the lungs retain more and more fluid, there's less surface area for blood to oxygenate, right? So as they retain more fluid, we expect the pulse ox to go down.
So what is the average pulse ox? Do most people that get admitted with shortness of breath from heart failure have a pulse ox under a certain number?
By the time they're readmitted, yes.
Why? What number?
Probably in the high 70s. I don't know for sure, but we're not interested in the number, right? We're not interested in absolute numbers. We're interested in relative numbers. We're interested in the trends over 3 or 6 days, right?
I think we're just trying to get at sensitivity.
Right. And so the thing is, the vast majority of people that come into the emergency room, have a normal pulse ox, or a pulse ox above 90 when they get admitted.
Okay.
Right? If it goes below 90, they should be admitted anyway. But they're,
Right.
you know, so the thing is that what I'm saying is, you know, the measurement of 93 or 92 or you know, 94 is difficult. You know, the over time, the variability of how they put it on their finger, the peripheral blood flow to their hand, etc., and especially in heart failure. So my question again, it all comes down to, I think the message that you're hearing is that you have a great idea with big market, and if it was me, you'd have to convince me that there's a reason to fund you. And the reason to fund you are the things you just said, but you have to tell me why your specific implementation is any better and that you've got the science out of it already, because I'm not paying for science, I'm paying for business.
Yeah. Are we cut off?
I think we're at time.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
Great job.
Thanks for the great input so far. So next up, we have a presentation from ARAW. So this is kind of switching to a more nonprofit route, but it should be really interesting. So.
I love to travel and discover new things, and coming to Noguchi and the African Research Academies for Women gives me the opportunity to know how research is undertaken and how to do teamwork, because in research you need a team of people to produce excellent results.
I would like to be a research scientist in the future, to study more about science, make findings that will help people out.
Because of my interest in research, I want to go into research in the biomedical field. And there are a lot of issues in the biomedical field that I think, if discovered, can help. So we want to do a research in the biomedical field.
In future, I would love to be a microbiologist to help cure diseases that have no cure, and also to solve real problems in the society and the community around.
So, growing up in Ghana with a brother with paralytic polio was a humbling experience for me. I always wondered what actually happened to him, and I had the biggest dream that I'm going to change the world. But living in a country where there's lack of emphasis in scientific research, you could only dream to a specific limit. Now, fast forward to the United States in my sophomore year, where I was exposed for the first time to scientific research. I was fascinated by the experiences, my interaction with faculty and my peers, and also the opportunity to actually do research and get paid. While wandering back home, our students never had that opportunity. Students have to pay research institutes before they have the opportunity to do research. So together with a group of students, we founded African Research Academies for Women. I know you would ask, why women? Well, there's a problem. Over the last 10 years, the average increase in the number of female researchers worldwide has been only 4%, and this is according to UNESCO. Well, this problem is even big in on the sub-Saharan continent, sub-Saharan Africa. We have only 29% of researchers being women on the average, and a country like Guinea has only 6% of researchers being women. My native country, Ghana, has only 18% of women who are into research, and they are all in academia. We have 0% in industry. So to understand the problem is to understand our educational system. Students pick their major, like final year in middle school, and so students pick science or the arts, and you can't change it. So right in high school, students who pursue arts and science, most science students, all their major focus is to get into medical school. And there are only 5 medical schools in the whole country. So students who don't get into medical school are given courses like biochemistry. To them, it's a failure. Now, right after graduation, every student is required to do 1 year of mandatory national service, and even students who actually pursued maybe a bachelor's in biochemistry are given like 1 year of national service that is totally unrelated to their field. So basically, they have no exposure to different careers in science. But students who actually went to medical school now go on to become physicians. So, well, the bigger problem is actually the inherent gender bias and negative stereotypes associated with being women who are interested in science. Basically, traditionally, they believe that women are supposed to be in the kitchen. And that is why you see all these low numbers when you get to the higher field in science and research. So what we do is, first of all, we host career fairs and workshops for middle school students and high school students to expose them to different careers in science. Well, our major work is actually having an 8-week summer research program for students doing their first and second year in college. And also now, during the national service, we're trying to also offer 1 year of paid internship for the students to engage in scientific research. So by the time they get to begin their career, they'll be very, very competitive for graduate school and master's applications as well. So our timeline, the organization basically was founded in the winter of 2013, and then we started establishing partnership with research institutes. We got our first invitation to the Clinton Global Initiative, and we raised $8,000, where we had our first summer program, where we had about 5 students participate. We were awarded the African Youth Excellence Award, and I was also invited to the White House to meet the president and the African Service during the U.S. African Leaders Summit. This year, spring, we also invited second again to the Clinton Global Initiative, and we got our 501c approved by the IRS. We raised $15,000, and then we did another summer program where we actually increased the number from 5 students to 10 students. And currently, we are developing international partnership with institutions like Johns Hopkins, Emory University, and University of Pennsylvania. So we are hoping to, again, give 1 year research support to the students throughout the whole 1 year of national service. And again, we're also thinking of launching another academy in different countries by 2017. So again, our first goal, which is met, we expose students early on in their career to scientific research, first year, second year in college. And our goal 2 is to establish partnership for international research internships. Here already we have Johns Hopkins, University of Pennsylvania, and Emory University all agreed in principle to host our students. And also to initiate research option for national service. And again, to launch other academies in Nigeria. We've already started conversation with University of Ibadan. So you could look at 2014, a section of our 2014 students and also some of our 2015 fellows. I would read one quote from one of the students that we had last year. She said, "I've acquired a lot of skills such as how to culture cells and how it is being used in cancer studies. Being part of this initiative has really aroused my interest in cancer research." One of our mentors, so what we do is after their research program, we pair students to, mentors to guide them in their career track. So one of our mentors, Nobel Prize winner last year in physiology or medicine, believed that we training one student may change the lives of another woman, because we believe that after our students pass through our program, they serve as ambassadors and mentors to the new students that we take into our program. And another faculty impact that we had was, she said she is the head of the clinical pathology department, but nobody even recognizes her work. So after their research program, we pay for these students to go present at national conferences, and these researchers now get exposure because then they are presenting the students are presenting their work, and it actually yielded collaboration for her as well. We really want to thank our team in Ghana who have made everything possible. They've been working on the ground. Also, our team here at Sinai who put up all this presentation, Efe and Sope. And again, I want to also thank my co-founder, Shadrach, who is currently in Ghana building a school for young girls and a medical clinic. So again, most importantly, all this wouldn't have been possible without our general sponsors and also our institutions that we are currently working with. Thank you.
I'll start. So I'm wondering how many women and girls do you think need to go through this program to actually change the culture in Ghana, so that how amplified do you think this effect can be, and what starting number of women do you think need to be exposed for that?
Yeah, so our target goal, we started with 5, and this year we had 10. We are hoping to have actually 20 next year, and I think it's a gradual process. So when you live in a patriarchal society, and not just patriarchal society, people have old beliefs that they are really stuck onto those beliefs. So it takes gradual process, but we believe that in about 2 or 3 years with our community education program that we have educating parents about the importance of girl-child education and everything, we believe that in about 2 or 3 years probably we'll start to see a change in culture and then them accepting the relevance of sending their girls to school, and then eventually them pursuing science and research.
So ultimately, you want to put yourself out of business, right? I mean, that's your objective, to get to the point where so many are in that you don't need to keep promoting it. So how many years out do you think that is? Do you think you can get there, and how much money would you need to get there? And then the other question is, where are you going to come up with all the mentorships for these people if the program's growing? Because it's like here, trying to get clinical sites for people to get clinical exposure is the limiting factor. How do you overcome that problem of finding enough mentorships for people?
So first of all, we have a lot of mentors on our team who are faculty at Emory University of Pennsylvania, Johns Hopkins. And what we're trying to even do now is pair with, so we have a conversation with New York Academy of Sciences. They have a Global STEM Alliance program, which is a very huge mentorship program. So we're trying to tap into their mentorship program. But again, we also have a team of programmers that we've gathered that are building an online system where we do the mentor-mentee pairing. So our mentors would sign in and would have a different look, and then they will know the students that they've been paired with, and then the students would also log in and also know the mentors that they've been paired with. And that way we could actually, collect data in terms of how that impact, like how the pairing is really helping them, but actually we'll be learning everything from the New York Academy of Sciences since they already have a structured system that is already working. That's what we are hoping to actually do.
I want to make sure I understood correctly. So you're saying that you'd have an online pairing so that they would stay there, you'd have mentors here, and they would work online to collaborate?
So
and no face-to-face.
So it's a bi-mentor. So we have mentors both locally and then internationally. So the students will be paired with mentors in their host country. So for instance, now we're working in Ghana. So they will be paired with a mentor, like a female researcher in Ghana, and also a mentor here in the United States based off on their research interests. So that is what we're hoping. So they would have a face-to-face contact with a mentor locally, and also they would have an online mentor as well.
But it looked like from your own numbers that the percentage of women researchers there are pretty small. So if all the mentors have to be women, aren't you going to run out of mentors before you get to the number of people you want to be in the program?
Yeah, so what I was intending to say was preferably female researchers. But actually, our mentorship team, even here in the United States, we have a lot of male researchers who are very, very passionate about what we are doing and are even serving on our board as well.
So what do you see as the biggest obstacles, culturally or otherwise, to the implementation of this in Ghana? It's forget the money. Just what things need to change, other than the patriarchal society thing. Are there other things in terms of access to jobs or this or that afterwards? Because you could create a whole bunch of researchers, but if there's no place for them to go, it would be difficult. So what do you see as the other issues that you need to answer?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues is the governments have to really participate and also be involved in. So for instance, according to UNESCO, the last time the government of Ghana funded research actually was in 1997. So we would love to encourage the government of Ghana to be quite interested in what we are doing, and also create a system or an environment where after even they graduate, get their PhD, they would have a welcoming environment to work as women researchers. And I think that is the major problem, and also our educational system. Because students pick their major, final year in their middle school, and you can't change it. As compared to the United States, where in college you could change your major several times. You pick your major in middle school, and you can't change it, so you do that your whole life. And also you get picked, your courses that you do are already picked up for you when you get to college. So students who are given biochemistry or immunology and stuff, they are not necessarily their first choice. They were given to them by the university. So all those systems, if there's sort of a change, I think that would really help our cause actually. But the bigger thing is having sort of a welcoming environment for the students after they go through the program.
I think one of the big points to emphasize right here is it's beyond just the research that's actually being done. It's the entire research ecosystem. So you have to like past like the faculty members that are getting funding from outside sources to also the students as well too. And like there's no infrastructure for like students to be funded to go to grad school and to actually like complete their education. So that like deters a lot of people from pursuing graduate degree programs in their native West African or other African countries. And then after that, I think the job prospects is definitely like another thing to consider. Whether it's from private companies like pharmaceuticals that are opening like sites in West African countries to actually employ people that are going to do research in West Africa or other African countries again too. So I think there are two components to it. So funding students for research to do research in West African countries, and also like after they do receive their graduate degrees to actually be able to continue working on research in their countries.
So you brought up two interesting points, right? One is, should you as a group try and bring industry into Ghana or other countries in order, just like, for example, in Ireland, they brought in a lot of, semiconductor companies, and then the government then committed to training the population to provide a base of skilled workers. Here, if you could bring in, pharmaceutical or other things, you might be able to get the government to do joint venture with the pharmaceutical companies to provide funding, to provide skilled, advanced training for, one group of people. The other question is, I'm sure there are a lot of social, environmental, other issues within Ghana and other countries that could you get the government to, help train people to pay back to, instead of doing 1 year of national stuff, to, like everything from clean water to, developing, antivirals or other things, antibiotics for problems, low-cost ones for problems locally. Could the government help sponsor, because they know they're going to get back, improving the quality of life of the country in general that way? Have you guys looked at any of that?
So last month we had the opportunity to go to the first ever conference that was held here in New York, and it was held for scientists, Ghanaian scientists particularly, in the diaspora who happened to be doing any sort of work and research on the continent. So if for folks like ourselves who are interested in fostering an environment of research among women in Ghana, they held this conference for individuals such as ourselves. And we had the opportunity to meet with the Minister of Education as well as the head of two of the key universities in the country, one in the capital as well as one in one of the major cities in the country. And so conversations have begun in terms of how we can work with the government to create opportunities for the girls to be involved in research that would impact life in Ghana, not just research that would be restricted to the lab, but research that would be applicable to, as you mentioned, the socioeconomic environment in Ghana. So actually this December, two of us, Kaja and myself, are going to be going over to Ghana to continue those conversations. Hopefully that would be stepping stone in that direction. And moving forward, we'll probably be able to establish some sort of partnership with the government such that we'll not just be working with private entities, but would be working with the government as well.
Wondering how much of a focus for you is public relations in general in Ghana to kind of display the problem and make people start talking about it and show the solutions that you've come up with?
So most of our focus has been targeting the young women and young girls as well in the high school level as well as in at the university level. We haven't done as much in terms of broad education of the public in general because what we were trying to do is change a mindset. I actually went to high school in Ghana and had the opportunity to come here to the US to continue my education, undergrad as well as medical school. So each time I go back, I make it a point to meet with the high school students who would eventually become girls who would have the opportunity to apply to our program. So in terms of publicity, our main or primary focus at this juncture is to try and change the mindset of the young girls, make it known that it is actually possible for them to embark on research opportunities, and also to increase the value of research amongst this population. Because you have to understand that, as Kojo mentioned previously, the ultimate goal for anyone who is interested in science is medicine. That was my goal as well. I lived it. And now I'm here and I've learned that that's not the only way to go if you're interested in science. There's so much that's available to you. And so each time we go back, we want to make it a point for these young girls to be aware that the world's your oyster. There's actually so much more there available.
Are you willing to broaden out from sort of the basic sciences to more like nurse practitioners, things like that? Because that might have a shorter training cycle and be able to turn over a lot more, especially primary care in the outside of larger cities and stuff like that, improving the healthcare.
Yeah, so to answer that question, just last month I was invited by Johns Hopkins School of Nursing, their dean, to meet with her and a couple of other deans at Hopkins. And that was pretty much one of the conversations that we actually had, that to also, try to also, because nursing is also science, to also try to expose, nursing students to the same sort of exposure that we're giving the undergraduate students. So it is a conversation that we actually had, and it's something that we are looking to also implement as well.
And have you spoke with the Gates Foundation?
No, we haven't had any contact with the Gates Foundation.
Yeah. Okay, the only reason I mention that, not that I know anything about them specifically, other than they seem to be spending an enormous amount of money in Africa right now for a number of different reasons. So, it sounds like your program is something they might be favorably disposed to.
How much money do you need?
So with our goal 1, we actually have a lot of sponsors who are sponsoring that 8-week summer research program for the students. But currently what we are working on is our goal 2 and our goal 3. So 8,000 per student, that is, including like their visa and also airfare ticket to get them to the United States for 1 summer research in one of our host institutions. And also another thing that we are hoping to implement either next year or next 2 years is the 1-year national service, which will cost $2,000 per year for the whole year for one student. And that's what we are hoping to do. Currently, the students who are doing national service are being paid way lesser than this amount. And we are trying to actually triple that amount, and that is the $2,000 the whole year.
Are you talking about 10 students, 1,000 students, 10,000 students, 1 million students? What sort of number of students are you trying to reach?
So we are using, for the beginning, we are using the students who pass through our program. So for instance, a student is a level 300 student and then part of our academy and went through the first week of summer, the first summer research program. Mm-hmm. Then after they graduate, then they can now qualify for this 1 year of national service. But we've not yet opened it out.
But what would you like to do? What's a reasonable number? Are you trying to reach 100,000 kids? Are you trying to reach, 10,000 kids? What's some practical or reach goal that you're trying to go after?
So in our first year, we are hoping to have pretty much around 5 students for the 1 year summer program. But eventually, in 10 years' time, we are hoping to have pretty much more than 100 students in 1 year research program that we are funding, the whole 1 year research that they're doing.
So as it stands, so in the summer of 2014, we funded 5 girls. Once those 5 girls are out of the university system, they would have to do the national service. Summer of 2015, we funded 10 girls. And so they would also be eligible to do the 1 year national service. So at the moment, we have 15 girls that we could potentially fund for the 1 year national service. Next year, we're hoping to take at least 20 girls in the program, so that would make a total of 35.
But then, are we doubling again the next year, and the next year doubling again, or is it some kind of a asymptote that you reach?
That's a wonderful question. So we've actually been
If somebody came to you with $200,000, here's a $200,000 check on the table, could you put together the infrastructure to train all of the girls that could be funded by that money?
We could.
Do you have any questions for us? I like your tie. Just so you know.
I have one other question then. Just, has there been any backlash culturally to this? I mean, I know it's just starting, so it's probably not too exposed, but I've done a lot of work in Uganda and clinical work there and building clinics. And some regions can have a pretty strong backlash because culture has been there for hundreds and thousands of years. Have you seen any backlash, and do you anticipate any backlash?
I guess I would say a teeny bit. So what happens is we've been working with a research facility in the capital, and primarily working with a department in that research facilities. And we started to initiate conversations with the head of the facility, but it always seems as if the organization was thought of as, oh, the little girls project. And so not taken as seriously as we would have liked. So I wouldn't say backlash per se, but I would definitely say that if it was a different demographic, we would have been taken more seriously.
All right. So now we have our final group. So Clapotic is going to present to you guys. See if I don't know where your kid is.
So this goes here. This goes upside down. This goes. Yay! All right. Okay, so this is our name is Clapotic, and we invite you to, that it's your genome and that you should anchor yourself into it, or in it. Okay, so to start off, about 15 years ago, these three men, we have Francis Collins, Bill Clinton, Craig Venter, and Tony Blair on a television screen off to the right here, announced the completion of the first human reference genome. And during this presentation ceremony, Bill Clinton said these words: "With this profound new knowledge, we are on the verge of gaining immense new power to heal. It will revolutionize the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of most, if not all, human diseases." Fast forward 15 years, 4 months, and 1 day to today, and the sequence of the human genome has revolutionized human genetics and provided great insight into human disease. It is undoubtedly one of the greatest achievements of modern science. However, our ability to translate information from any given patient's genome into actionable treatment strategies remains a daunting challenge. The reason for this is that current technologies provide limited views of the genome, often leading to incomplete or even incorrect interpretations of genetic cause for disease. In most cases, the use of combined technologies is required, as individual technologies often cannot effectively interrogate genetic variation sufficiently to inform clinical decisions as standalone methods. So here we have the beginning of the Odyssey. And in some sense, we can think of our genome as a book. The use of current clinical methods for identifying genetic causes of disease is akin to trying to understand the complex allegories of these stories by reading disconnected tiny fragments of the text and gleaning the greater meaning from them. In this analogy, the ideal way to query the text is to try to grab coherent blocks that are medically meaningful. So blocks of sequence with medical relevance. So what are existing technologies missing? So if we continue along with the book analogy, it is easy to visualize both the strengths and weaknesses of the most commonly used approaches in the field. So methods that interrogate small DNA mutations, like microarrays as used by 23andMe, give you a limited view of the text, reading only single letters here and there along the page. Additionally, interpretation requires a lot of a priori knowledge and a gold standard for comparison. Targeted approaches like PCR are sort of the current workhorse of diagnostics, but they can only resolve short little fragments and they tend to produce confounding secondary signals. Current enrichment approaches like exome sequencing try to target informative word classes, like coding sequences in DNA, or here proper names of places and people. It gives you a sense of the text, but it can lack critical elements of context. Shotgun whole genome sequencing tries to alleviate many of these issues by trying to examine the text in its entirety. Unfortunately, that power comes at a cost. Too much information can confound interpretation. The method also often fails to capture the most important information, especially in complex portions of the text, such as repeat structures and complex structures. For example, at the end of these two last paragraphs, there's a single passage that is identical. And so trying to assemble them from short read whole genome sequencing, you might accidentally switch which goes where, and then now the text is sort of very confused. So we propose an alternative. Our method permits the user to extract discrete units of genomic information with exactly enough context for accurate interpretation. Perfect sequencing makes all sorts of things possible. It enables drastic improvement of patient confidence and minimization of unproductive treatments in every medical venue, from organ transplants to the treatment of allergies, to infectious diseases, vaccine design, cancer monitoring, the administration of everyone's favorite drugs like digoxin and warfarin, and of course all these the periodic untreated idiopathies that patients suffer through, because the only correct answer is reachable through smarter and more efficient sequencing. So if we consider this very typical cancer patient who comes in and has a lump, is how it usually begins. They have the typical BRCA1/2 targeted diagnosis, and after 4 weeks, the results come back negative. So in the meanwhile, just on the basis of happenstance, they enroll in a clinical trial. And after the clinical trial is concluded, they have 2 additional family members who come down with breast cancer. So almost out of curiosity, another panel is ordered, and a set of rare mutations in an oncogene are found. And in this case, the patient's experience was serendipitous. After her negative result for BRCA1 and 2, she enrolled in this clinical trial, and it just so happened that the drug being tested was efficient at treating RAD51D tumors. Total happenstance. It was completely unknown at the time. Now, based on this larger panel result, the results from this larger panel, a cascade of well-informed medical decisions could be made by her mother, by both her and her mother, from whom she inherited the mutation. The lesson here is that not every patient will necessarily be as lucky as this one. Additionally, it illustrates that genetic screening can be used to inform and personalize treatment. So how do we go about ensuring that every patient is able to get actionable information hidden in their genome before they actually make decisions? So the solution that we propose is a method for PCR-free selection and sequencing of long DNA fragments. So using a platform that we've designed, we can enrich for single locus or several loci of interest. And then combining with cutting-edge sequencing technology, we provide richer information in minutes rather than in weeks or months or years. This is how it works. A simple cheek cell collection can be performed by a clinician, or any other sort of tissue sample can be sort of fed into this contraption. And they're fed in, and amplification-free long fragments of DNA are generated. And then with the addition of a simple targeting reagent, the sample can then be processed and long-read sequencing can be directed to a specific locus or loci of interest at great depth. After only a few minutes, the processed DNA sample can be immediately applied to any of a variety of sequencing platforms depending on the clinical need. And in this way, immediately provide a far more complex picture of how a patient's genome is contributing to their disease and how to navigate those genetics when treating them. All right.
Well, why don't we, so why don't we stop here?
Okay.
If you guys have market questions, we'll just start the question session.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
Can we suggest that we need to see the rest of the slide?
Yeah.
It's what you guys do, right?
All right. So our method could effectively replace multiplex and long-range PCR, which makes up about half of all three of these. We would like to at least suggest that in the case of like BRCA1, instead of having to go in and amplify each one of the exons and sequence them with Sanger sequencing, we could just pull down the whole locus and sequence the entire thing, including flanking regions, and effectively recapitulate the current process of BRCA1 and BRCA2 assessment in a single test rather than in an incremental looking at exons. If nothing's found there, you do something a little bit more complicated, and you continue escalating. Each time the patient has to wait 2 to 4 weeks to find out what the status of their tumor is. And so that's our team, and that's our presentation. So if you have any questions.
I'll say, just in full disclosure, that the only thing I know about jeans is I wear Lucky Brand. But that being said, from the business point of view, I had a couple questions. And I assume that if it's a known mutation, that what you're doing has some benefit over what exists now.
Yes.
Okay, so then I'll leave that to you for the details. But my question is, if I was a VC,
yes,
and I was looking at this and trying to invest, separate from the question is, can you do better, cheaper, what exists now? Am I wrong in understanding that, you know, a lot of this depends on serendipity? One's going to have to build a library of genes and then have enough clinical data to make, you know, oh, they have BRCA, whatever, you know, it seems easy now, but, you know, that X years worth of stuff. So who's going to pay for that X years worth of stuff? So is your business model that you're trying to develop libraries of genes that then need clinical correlation, and eventually your stuff will be useful when you do that, or that there's enough stuff available today that if I use your methodology, I'll be able to get a quicker, simpler read and better therapy?
So our implementation of this technology is more around, first, doing the second point you just said, taking what's currently known about the genome and better assaying it on an individual basis, but also we're not trying to build individual gene libraries and compile all this research and data and analyze it. We're actually implementing a method to do that better. So part of the great thing about this technology is it's applicable to a lot of problems, and a lot of these problems we see in research right now. And that's really the first target area that we can have the greatest effect, is people trying to solve these problems.
So who would they sell this to?
Yeah, so I'm wondering, could you highlight the benefits over site-directed PCR?
Well, so with site-directed PCR, the some of the benefits are that PCR has PCR limitations built into them. So if there are locations that are AC or GC or AT or GC rich, you're not gonna be able to amplify those using PCR. You might be able to pull them down with short read hybridization methods and assess them that way. But if it's at all repetitive or it skews from that sort of sweet spot, you can't amplify it. But here we can pull down 100 kb fragment without any problem.
Right.
So I think there's you can just sort of break it down. With PCR, there's problems with the length, so you can only amplify and sequence so much base pairs at a time. And there's also a problem with scalability. So if I want to PCR and sequence 10 loci at a time, I have to be very creative, and sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. With our approach in theory, we can sort of hit both of those problems head on. So we can both get longer fragments, and then we can scale up. So if we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 targets, they can all be done in one assay. So, and there are already actually a lot of platforms that sort of attempt to solve these problems, and we would overcome those mostly by leveraging the long read sequencing that's coming out on the market today. So most of the platforms that exist that are sort of scalable are using sort of short read technologies, which are great in a lot of places, but they tend to break down in complicated, repetitive parts of the genome. So we sort of can better both PCR and the sort of existing capture and sequencing technologies that exist.
Yeah, I'm wondering, do you have any examples of where there are clinically relevant mutations that you can detect that PCR can't?
Okay, so I think this is, hold up, sorry, I'm sorry, further down? No, it's further up. So, where is it? Where are the slides? I don't know where they went. Okay, so this right here is actually, this is from a paper we actually published about 6 months ago. This FMS3, like tyrosine kinase 3, or FLT3, is implicated in acute myelogenous leukemia. And one of the principal indicators of of patient outcome is the presence or absence of a duplication of a single domain in the gene. So you can see this internal tandem duplication, it correlates with poor outcome. And so the whole gene is actually quite big, and these duplications can be anywhere from 300 base pairs to 600 to 800 base pairs in size. Fortunately for this ITD variant of FLT3, there are actually kinase inhibitors that will inhibit it specifically without affecting the wild type receptor. So it presents a uniquely druggable target. Unfortunately, as cancer tends to go, the ITD positive variant will accumulate these gatekeeper mutations that'll block the drug. It presents a very difficult problem to assess using Illumina for actually a number of reasons. So the first reason is you have to be able to identify whether the gatekeeper mutations and the internal tandem duplication are actually in the same copy of the gene, or whether they're even coming from the same cell. And additionally, looking at these duplications is difficult because the duplications are larger than sort of the largest Illumina reads, so you can't even see them. So being able to look at this single locus with very long reads allows you to see that and allows you to see sort of where the treatment is going. So, yeah.
Thanks. Is the method patentable or patented?
So that
keeps someone else from using the technology.
It's a complicated question, actually.
Of course.
Naturally. It is a protein-based.
Yeah, so it's a protein-mediated DNA pull-down method. So it's interesting because there's a lot of different ways that you can do a protein-mediated DNA pull-down. Our specific method has not been patented and is patentable, and that is something we are working on right now. And there are other methods that have been released that are a protein-mediated DNA pull-down that honestly kind of suck compared to ours. So it's an interesting region. I mean, there's definitely a lot of work going into it by a lot of different companies. I mean, NimbleGen is a good one, and we're working with Sinai IP right now to get all the patent stuff done, and once that is done, then we can reveal a bit more about what kind of encompasses our method.
So do you have data that shows how much better you are than the ones that suck?
Yes.
And it shows.
I like watching the science talk here. This is really good.
Yeah, and it shows it conclusively.
We have a few experiments that show that we can capture. So if we have admixtures of DNA, we can coat a probe and stick it in the mixture and pull out only one of the our target and pass it on to another. So go ahead.
But let me give you that you have the best one that exists. I'll give you that.
All
Since
right.
I know nothing, I'll believe them, and they say you're the best one that exists. Him. Okay, I'll believe him, and this is the best one you exist. What's your business model? Why should I care to invest in you?
So the biggest thing coming in sequencing is this kind of 4th generation long read technology. Right now, none of the modern day technology exists to really effectively utilize it. What we're doing is meant for these 4th generation sequencers and will be the standard in 2 to 3 years for how people do DNA sequencing sample preparation.
Okay, so and why should I care?
Because I mean, if we're just looking at the research market for like exome sequencing, that's $900 million market.
That's why I should care.
Yes.
Okay. But what are you selling?
So we are selling the sample preparation for DNA sequencing. So a large cost of the actual sequencing is just sample preparation. So to give you an example, if you were to use next generation or 4th generation sequencing, you don't want to sequence a whole genome. It costs way too much. You want to capture what you want to sequence. So we have the best capture method for these sequencing machines. So what we're selling is a big step in the process of sequencing.
Okay, so when you showed the numbers for the market, that was for the whole market, including the devices themselves as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what percentage of that market goes to the assay preparation stuff?
Well, so roughly 45% of each of these is captured by PCR-based diagnostics. So that would be basically the sample preparation. Sort of to add to what he said, the other contribution that we uniquely bring is the fact that we would be enabling clinicians to do the DNA prep and do the sequencing right in the clinical exam room, rather than having to have it be sent out. The patient goes home like, okay, I gave my DNA sample. Now I have to worry for like 2 to 4 weeks about what is going to come in the mail in that time. And if it comes back negative, and they have to continually go back for a more invasive, more complicated test, that is a definite drag.
But would they not come back for a more complicated test?
Well,
because the results are going to be the same.
They won't be the same.
They won't be the same.
In our case, so in this BRCA1 case, someone actually goes in and amplifies every single one of these 24 little snippets, because assessing all 80 kb of sequence, including the regulatory regions and uncoding, splicing things, and all of these other bits, it's too much to invest up front to investigate the patient's health. So if that comes back negative, then you have to ratchet up and say, we're going to look at the greater context. And then if that doesn't turn up, you actually go to exome sequencing. So you have to keep getting bigger and bigger as things.
And do you do all of that in one shot?
We do most of that in one shot. So we wouldn't be able to recapitulate the results for exome sequencing, for the whole exome right away. I think at some point in the distant future, we might be able to basically supplant exome sequencing. But at least in the near future, we might be able to perform simultaneous pull down of 100 very suspicious oncogenic loci and assess them all in one shot in the same cost that it takes to do one.
So I'm wondering what the barriers are to that, because it seems like you have to customize the assay for the target at this point. So aren't there going to be more difficult targets, and might this cost more dependent on what targets you're looking at?
So for this case right now, if you compare this method to your standard multi-gene panel, the costs are very similar or a lot less in some cases. So the actual mechanics of how we develop the targeting is very cheap and efficient. So being able to say, I want to capture 50 genes, well, once we build, a 50 gene target list and validate them, then it's very simple and very cheap as well.
So would you validate that per patient, or would you only look at certain targets that are common?
We wouldn't actually, so we can, it's actually calculatable how, on the basis of variation across the human population, how to pull down large fragments in the context of that variation. So we could actually mathematically ensure that even though someone has a different haplotype, we could still pull down their BRCA1 locus.
And that's an advantage that the current methods don't have, because they're focusing on short fragment pull downs, which are much more susceptible to these sorts of issues. But because we can pull down large fragments, you can sort of capture unknowns more easily.
So what's the next step, and how much money do you need to get there?
So we're interested in the $400,000 to $600,000 range, and I think that would enable us to get to preclinical trials here at Sinai.
And then how long to do preclinical trials, and how much is that?
So preclinical trials are kind of tough right now. It's I only say that I mean they're tough, but I say that because there's a chance that we can actually go through 510K, which would significantly reduce the cost and time.
And open up to your competitors.
Yeah. But, I mean, if we already have, we feel we already have the right technology, and we're also working with Mount Sinai to establish this, so I couldn't imagine any other competitor that could actually compete with that. So
if there's 900 million,
pretty big.
if there's 900 million at risk, there'll be a lot of competitors competing.
Yeah, no, that is very true. But the 400 to 600K range gets us past where we're at now, which is prototyping and kind of fine-tuning those tweaks, getting that initial data set that you can say, give to researchers, showing them this is worthwhile product, this is something that you need for next generation sequencing on fourth generation machines. So beyond that, I can't really provide.
Okay, how much would you charge for that?
So
per test.
Per use cost is actually very low.
Yeah.
So how are you going to make money?
So current gene panels can cost anywhere from like $200 to like $4,000, and above that is exome. So this is for clinical products, yes, but we can do. Okay. So I mean like single sample is on the order of tens of dollars, and even selling that for a research setting. So let's say you have 96 cell lines that you want to look at specific areas in their genome, being able to pull down and sequence for tens of dollars compared to what is current day technology, about 150 plus, depending on how nice your sales rep is, for pull down technology. So we're an order of magnitude less in terms of cost per sample, and provide a lot more rich information as well.
Is it?
Sorry.
We're done?
Yeah.
We're done. Thank you very much, Howard, Cameron, and Frank.
Oh, hi.
Hi, sorry. So I think we're going to open it up to the audience for just 1 or 2 questions while we get feedback from the judges. I also invite everyone to the networking reception right after this. If anyone has any more questions for the groups, they should all be there, as well as the judges, if they want to keep hounding the panelists. So I think there should be runners. If anyone has a question for any of the teams, or if you've been questioned out, then we will wait for feedback. I'll do a very long drum roll.
I know.
Yeah, I'm just finished writing this.
Yeah.
There's a charge for that.
I should also mention that we have some cash prizes for the teams as well. So ranging from $100 to $300 that were provided by MSIT. So they didn't do this just for the love of science, I guess.
Yeah, I think I just want to.
No, I forgot the interim music, so little Jeopardy music. Yeah. Building suspense. Just the drum roll, that's all I can do. You could do an audience Does the audience want to pick their favorite as well? No? No participation? Okay. How about team one?
So.
Team one who liked their presentation. All right. And team number 2? All right. And team 3? Thanks, guys. It looks like we have some promising results here. We have the final results. All right, so our 3rd place prize goes to Cardimetrics. So come get your prize.
No, it's not my stationery. Yeah.
All right, and 2nd place goes to Clapotic. That may have killed the suspense for 1st place. 1st place goes to ARAW. And you get money and this wonderful trophy. All right, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you judges.